This morning, we awoke to terrible news coming out of Pakistan. A Pakistan International Airlines plane carrying over 100 passengers crashed in a residential neighborhood in Karachi. My heart goes out to all the victims and their families. Our thoughts are with Pakistan today. We're starting a bit earlier this morning because we have a cabinet meeting early this afternoon, so thank you all for joining us now. Last night, the premiers and I held our 10th weekly call since the beginning of the crisis. And we talked about what's been on everyone's mind lately, how we can safely reopen the economy. Over the past few months, Canadians have been doing a great job of staying at home, maintaining physical distancing, and listening to public health advice. And that means we can restart some activities, but we're not out of the woods yet. COVID-19 remains a serious health threat. We have to proceed with caution and keep listening to science, or we risk losing the progress we've made. So today, I want to outline what we know needs to happen to successfully reopen the economy and adjust to our new normal. First, we need to continue scaling up our testing capacity so we can quickly identify new cases and isolate them. We're working with provinces and territories to expand testing by procuring things like reagents and swabs. While some provinces have the capacity to meet their current needs, we're collaborating to ramp up testing so we can protect Canadians and effectively manage future outbreaks. Second, we need to accelerate our ability to do contact tracing. After we've confirmed and isolated new cases, we have to get in touch with everyone who may have been exposed to the virus and make sure they take measures to quarantine and monitor themselves for symptoms or get tested. While provinces and territories are managing testing and contact tracing differently, our government has trained federal employees who can make 3,600 contact tracing calls a day, 7 days a week. Statistics Canada has also an additional 1,700 interviewers ready to go who can make up to 20,000 calls a day. These federal resources are available to assist provinces and territories with any surges or backlogs or challenges they have in contact tracing. We're already helping to make calls in Ontario and stand ready to help anywhere else. Third, we have to ensure that data collected across jurisdictions is shared between provinces and territories. This will help us track the spread of the virus, adapt our response accordingly, and save lives. Aujourd'hui, je veux souligner ce qu'il faut faire pour réussir la réouverture de l'économie. I want to talk about what we need to do to ensure a successful reopening of the economy and an adjustment to the new reality. First, we must continue to increase our testing capacity so that we can quickly detect and isolate any new cases. Second, we must be able to quickly contact people who have been exposed so that they can self-isolate and monitor their symptoms or get tested. While the provinces and territories are conducting testing and doing their contact tracing a little differently, our government has trained federal employees who are now prepared to step up and help to find people who've been exposed to the virus across the country. These employees can make 3,600 calls a day, 7 days a week. Furthermore, Statistics Canada has made available 1,700 interviewers who can make up to 20,000 calls a day. We are already making those calls in Ontario, and we are offering our assistance to anyone who needs it. Third, we have to ensure that the data collected by the provinces and territories are shared right across the country. That will help us to follow the spread of the virus, to adapt our response accordingly, and to save lives. Now, Canada is a vast country, and some regions have been hit harder than others by the pandemic. That's why plans to relax restrictions vary from one jurisdiction to another. But in order for people to move around freely and start getting back to normal life, we have to improve our ability to quickly pinpoint the virus and isolate it. All premiers recognize how important this is, and I want to thank them for their engagement in this issue. Since the beginning of this crisis, all jurisdictions have been working towards one common goal: protecting Canadians. The next phase of our collaborative efforts is on testing, contact tracing, and data collection. And I've told the premiers that the federal government is here to support, facilitate, and fund this important work. Taking strong, collaborative action to expand testing and contact tracing is important for both Canadians and businesses to have confidence that we're on the right foot. They need to know that we have a coordinated approach to gradually reopen that is rooted in science, evidence, and the ability to rapidly detect and control any future outbreaks.
In order for people to be able to move around freely again and get back to their usual routine, we must be able to quickly detect and isolate any new cases. All the premiers understand just how important that is, and we agree. From the beginning of this crisis, all orders of government have been working together to protect Canadians. The next phase of our collaboration will focus on testing, contact tracing, and data sharing. And as I said to my colleagues right across the country, the federal government will be there to support, facilitate, and fund that work. It's important for Canadians, as it is for businesses, to know that we are cooperating in order to step up the testing and contact tracing. The last few months have been very difficult for everyone because we're going through a period of uncertainty, and life was turned upside down overnight. But we put in place certain measures to help people get through the crisis, whether you're a student, a retiree, or unemployed. And if you need help but you're not sure where to begin, we now have a new online tool that can help you. Go to canada.ca coronavirus benefits to get more information. You can answer a couple of questions and the tool will give you a list of programs that you are eligible for.
We've set up a number of programs to help everyone from students to parents to seniors get through this crisis. If you need support but you're not quite sure where to start, we now have a new online tool to help you. Just go to canada.ca/coronavirus benefits. You'll find a list of a few simple questions, and the tool will generate an array of programs for which you may be eligible. I want to close today by addressing the significant increase in acts of racism against Asian Canadians. Over the past few weeks and months, businesses, buildings, and statues have been vandalized. People have been verbally abused and physically attacked. It's unacceptable. Hate, violence, and discrimination have no place in Canada. This is not who we are as Canadians. I want to thank those who have stood up against violence and exposed what is happening in our communities. We need to speak out against racism wherever it is found so we can stop it. To Asian Canadians across the country, know that we all stand with you. We will not let hate divide us. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go to the phone for questions. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Première question, Marie-Estelle Le Devoir. À vous.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. I'd like to talk about the contact tracing and testing. You did discuss this in your conversation with the premiers. And I would like to know whether you arrived at an agreement on a national contact tracing strategy. And does that include using mobile applications for contact tracing? And if so, are we talking about voluntary use or what exactly?
Merci. À travers le pays,
now, right across the country, we now have the ability to conduct 60,000 tests a day, but we are not yet at that point because a number of regions do not need to increase the pace of their testing because the situation there is more under control. But in other regions, we will be there to support providing the necessary materials. We talked to the provinces last evening, and we've been talking to them for a number of weeks now to find out what their specific testing needs are and also what they need to do to increase their contact tracing. As I said, we have set up a network of public servants that are prepared to help the provinces with their testing. But the first step is really understanding what the needs are and what the plans are in every province and territory. And we're working very closely with Ontario now on contact tracing, and we will be there to help any other province or territory that requires assistance. We just need them to ask us what can be done to increase the pace of that testing and contact tracing. With respect to applications, we're continuing to work on that, and we'll have more to say about that in the coming days.
We have, from the very beginning, highlighted how important it is to increase testing capacity. We have currently a testing capacity around 60,000 tests a day, but that capacity hasn't been reached yet anywhere in the country because we have a number of provinces that don't have to augment all that much their testing capacity because things are under control, but everyone needs to be ready in case there is a surge, which is why we're moving forward on ensuring that there is that testing capacity, and we continue to ramp it up. In regards to contact tracing, we know that that is an essential element as we move forward. We're working very closely with Ontario. We've developed a public service approach federally that is there to support the mechanisms in the province to do that contact tracing, and we're ramping it up. But we also are there, obviously, to help any other province that would need help with contact tracing, and we've asked provinces to highlight for us what their plans are and how we can help with that. In regards to the app, we continue to work on that and hopefully have things to share in the coming days or weeks.
Follow up? On another topic, Parliament is expected to return on Monday. It has been suggested that the Parliament be able to sit and discuss many other issues. So, do you agree that it's time to expand Parliament's activities? And should MPs be able to address any subject other than the pandemic? First of all, we're in a situation where the pandemic has become our everyday reality for all Canadians, and we have to take action and respond accordingly. And, of course, there's no doubt that that is our priority as a government. We want to be there to help Canadians during this crisis, but it's also the priority of all parliamentarians. But there are conversations occurring right now with the different parties in the House of Commons to see how we can return to work and how we should do that. Canadians know full well that we need a functioning parliament during this crisis, and that's exactly what we're seeking to do.
Merci. Prochaine question. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. Prochaine question, Émilie Bergeron, Agence QMI. À vous.
Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. For a number of weeks, you've been talking about the importance of doing more testing, and yet in a number of clinics, the number of tests is not very significant, even in the Greater Montreal region. So what do you say to Canadians who are hesitating to go and get tested? Well, we need to do much more testing. That is how we will be able to control the reopening of the economy and control the spread of the virus. That's important. And I know that the provinces may have different approaches to this, but we do need to ramp up the pace of testing, and a number of provinces are now expanding the scope of their testing protocols so that anyone who wants to get tested can. But it will also be important to ramp up the contact tracing as well and encourage people who may be infected with COVID to get tested as well. A follow-up?
Oui, bien sûr.
Yes.
Avec le taux de chômage qui, on le sait, va augmenter de façon assez fulgurante.
Now, do you consider
les seuils d'immigration et que pensez-vous
that immigration levels should stay the same? I think it's important to understand that we have paused our economy for the time being. There are a lot of people that have to stay home and cannot work. But as soon as the economy starts up again, we will need workers. I know and I'm confident that the Canadian economy will rebound, and newcomers to this country are an important part of the growth that we're going to have in this country. We will have to set the immigration levels at a responsible threshold, but give proper opportunities both to Canadians and people coming from abroad. Newcomers create jobs in Canada. That has always been the case, and it will still be the case in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Ryan Tilty, National Post, line open.
Yeah, good morning, sir. I'm wondering, the negotiations are ongoing over the reopening of Parliament, which is set to start on Monday. I'm wondering what your position is. Do you want the status quo to continue? Do you want to see some sort of larger Parliament, some sort of hybrid model? What are you looking for?
I think we want what Canadians want, to make sure that there is a functioning Parliament that will ensure that questions and preoccupations from across the country get heard. There are certainly non-COVID things we could be moving forward on, but I think the focus will always need to be on this exceptional situation we're in and our government's and our country's response to that. Those discussions continue to be ongoing, and I know that all parties are united in wanting to ensure that we continue, as we have been, to demonstrate that our democracy is strong and our institutions are functioning, not just despite the crisis, but because of the crisis. Évidemment, il y a plusieurs enjeux dont il va falloir.
Of course, there are a number of issues that we will have to discuss in the coming weeks. Not all of them are directly linked to COVID-19, but the priority will be the crisis in which we are now involved. And we will continue those discussions with the other political parties because Canadians want a functioning Parliament. For a number of weeks now, we've been sitting 3 times a week, and we will continue to get the work done so that we're making the right decisions for Canadians right across the country.
Thank you. Ryan, next question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, sir, do you envision an end to the virtual parliaments and more sessions in person? Do you see some sort of hybrid model? What do you physically expect Parliament to see in the coming weeks? And do you think it should extend its sitting through the summer?
These are conversations that are ongoing between all party leaders. I think obviously we will be physically present in reduced numbers regardless of what the final decision is by all parties. There will have to be a way for parliamentarians across the country to express the concerns and ask questions on behalf of their constituents. These are the kinds of things that we're working out, and I know just as we have been able to sit over the past weeks 3 times a week and continue the functioning of our Parliament, we will be able to continue that into the coming weeks.
Just as we were able to respond to questions and ensure that Canadians right across the country are properly represented in Parliament in recent weeks, we will continue to work to ensure that our democracy is functioning properly in the coming weeks.
We'll take one more question on the phone.
Thank you. Merci. Next question, Jordan Press, the Canadian Press, line open.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Just on the contact tracing, can you provide some specifics about the timelines that your government is going through to make sure that all these separate efforts in provinces are actually consistent, not siloed, and that the federal government is actually making sure there's a national effort to ramp up testing?
Well, we know that part of the reopening of the economy will involve Canadians traveling more within their provinces and potentially across the country. That's why we need to have a national approach that is going to be able to have comparable data right across the country and comparable tools. Even in regions where the spread of the virus seems very much under control right now, there could be a resurgence. And when that happens, we need to be able to respond quickly and comprehensively. And that's very much what the federal government is working on. We know, and we've heard from provinces, that contact tracing is a challenge in terms of delivering the bodies necessary to make the phone calls, to trace everyone a positive test could have been in contact with in the previous days. That's why we've put forward the logistical support to be able to deliver that to any province across the country.
A follow-up, Jordan?
As my follow-up, I want to go to something else. Last week, the Premier of Nova Scotia said he would wait and see whether Ottawa is willing to hold a public inquiry into the mass shooting in his province. So very simply, Prime Minister, will you commit that your government will lead an independent public inquiry into the shooting?
I think people have many questions about what happened in Nova Scotia, and we're encouraging the RCMP to do its work on the initial investigation. But as we move forward, there will, of course, be larger questions to ask, and we will work with the Government of Nova Scotia on getting those answers. We know
that the RCMP will continue to conduct its investigation on exactly what happened in Nova Scotia, but of course there will be more questions, and the Government of Canada is perfectly prepared to work with the Government of Nova Scotia to find answers to those questions.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Salima Shifty, CBC. I want to go back to contact tracing. You're offering several thousand federal employees to help with that, but if only Ontario has signed on and not Quebec, how does that square with the immediate improvement that you were talking about earlier? And is the message of urgency being lost here?
We have been reaching out over the past week to all provinces to determine what their plan is on contact tracing, what exactly they are doing, and whether or not they need more help. We have highlighted that we have more resources that can be deployed immediately. They've been in place for a while, and we certainly hope to hear back from the provinces that could need this quickly to tell us whether and how they want us to help. A number of provinces have, some have not yet. Okay.
For a number of days, we have been telling the provinces that we have available resources, and we ask them directly what their plans are with contact tracing and what their capacity is, and whether they need help or want more resources to do that. A number of provinces answered, and some have not yet responded to that, but we hope to be able to help right across the province, the country, particularly in those areas that need help.
Apple and Google have actually said that their tracking platforms will require one app per country, and there is a need for this to happen quickly. Obviously, we've been waiting on an announcement for this for weeks. People need to download the app. Will Ottawa step in and impose one app for provinces to use to make digital tracing as effective as possible?
Around the world, there have been a number of different apps developed, Singapore, Australia, other places. One of the challenges that those apps have encountered is that it has to sit in the foreground of your phone and drains the battery. That's why the fix that Apple and Google are talking about bringing in the beginning of June will be extremely important as a base for an effective contact tracing or exposure notification app. We are working with a number of different partners on potential apps. We're working closely with Apple and Google on the update that they will be bringing forward, and it is our expectation that when the time comes for that to be released, we will be able to recommend strongly to Canadians a particular app that will help us manage the spread of COVID-19. Okay. Les applications qui ont été développées à travers
The applications that have been developed around the world to fight COVID-19
serait amélioré s'il se reposait sur
would be
un changement que
improved if they incorporate a change that Apple and Google are now making in their systems. This is something that should be released in June, and we are hoping to be able to recommend an application to Canadians at that time so that we can help to control the spread of the virus.
Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Prime Minister, I want to ask about the situation in Hong Kong. As you know, the Chinese government is considering very serious security legislation that's going to really change the situation on the ground there for at least for the 300,000 Canadians who are there now, and could very likely end the one country, two systems arrangement that they've had for a while. What's your message to Beijing now, and would you consider any kind of sanctions or any formal diplomatic rebuke if the government proceeds with this?
We are concerned with the situation in Hong Kong. We have 300,000 Canadians who live in Hong Kong, and that's one of the reasons why we want to ensure that the one country, two systems approach continues for Hong Kong. We have long called for a de-escalation of tensions and genuine dialogue with Hong Kong, between Hong Kong citizens and Beijing. We continue to call for that, and we will keep monitoring the situation closely. Okay. Nous sommes très préoccupés par la situation.
We're very concerned about the situation in Hong Kong and have been for a long time. There are 300,000 Canadians living there, and the approach of one country and two systems that's been in place in Hong Kong continues to be very important. We have made it clear to Beijing that it's very important to pursue that dialogue with the citizens of Hong Kong and to reduce the tensions there.
Steve Chase, Globe and Mail. Prime Minister, I want to ask you what you're doing to protect the intellectual property that's being generated by this $1.2 billion you've poured into COVID-related research. Canada's one of Canada's spy agencies, CSIS, sent a note to bulletin to university researchers and academics, warning them that there are increased risks right now, and particularly because people are working from home, particularly because there's a lot of international collaboration taking place. The FBI sent out a similar warning, but unlike Canada, they actually identified the country they're most concerned about as China. So my question for you is, what are you doing to protect us? Can you tell us anything about the breaches that have taken place so far? And are you going to build some kind of international coalition with other countries to confront China?
We have long been concerned about intellectual property protections in Canada. That's why we've increased the funding for the CSC, which is a communication security establishment that watches over cyber attacks and makes sure that our systems are safe. The CSC is among the best intelligence agencies in the world in terms of that, and work constantly with partners all around the world, with Five Eyes and others. We will continue to make sure that they have the tools necessary to keep Canadians and our institutions safe, and part of that involves notifying, but part of that involves working behind the scenes to keep Canadians' information and data protected. We will continue to ensure that they have the tools to do their work.
Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau. Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada.
Louis Blouin, Radio-Canada. Good morning, Mr. Trudeau. You are now negotiating with the opposition parties for the suspension of work. Now, with respect to the CERB, is that part of your negotiations? The Bloc is asking you to introduce a more progressive model to allow people or encourage people to return to work. Is that part of what your plans are? And when do you expect to make a decision on this? Well, I think there are two parts of this negotiation when it comes to the return of Parliament. We are focusing on the structure that will allow all Canadians right across the country to be properly represented in a Parliament that will be limited in terms of people there in person and others who will be participating by video conference. The other issue has to do with technology and logistics decisions. related to the return of Parliament. Now, there are parties making suggestions and recommendations to improve some of the programs that are there for Canadians in order to better help Canadians and businesses in this crisis, and that's what we continue to work on with them. But we prefer to separate the discussions on the return to Parliament from those with respect to amending specific policies.
There are two things that are being discussed that are a little bit blended in some people's views that we tend to keep a little more separate. There are reflections on how Parliament is coming back, how we will ensure that our institutions, our democracy continues to function strongly as it has over the past few weeks with 3 sessions a week. We know that going forward we're going to keep working and need to bring forward new issues. And then there is the other reflection on proposals and suggestions made by other parties on how to improve the benefits we're sending to Canadians, how to facilitate the reopening of the economy, and those conversations will continue on a separate track.
Hier, le premier ministre du Québec,
Yesterday, François Legault said he was competing with the CERB, and this is harming the ability of people to return to work. Well, we are in a situation where millions of Canadians have no job, where tens of millions of students that were relying on a summer job this year in order to pay their rent or pay their tuition will not have a summer job. We need to be there to support people who need help, and that's exactly what we're doing. The unemployment rate among young people is close to 35%. Young people want to work, they want to contribute, but they want to receive the necessary support, and that's why we brought in the emergency student benefit.
We know that millions of Canadians are off work right now, and tens of thousands of students who were relying on summer jobs to be able to pay for their groceries, their rent, their tuition fees, are not going to be able to find those any summer jobs. We needed to make sure that we're supporting those students so that they can continue in their path to higher education, so that they can continue to contribute to society. I know lots of young people want to contribute. That's why we're creating more jobs, more opportunities for them to develop experience. But we also needed to make sure that they were supported during this summer of unemployment, and that's exactly what we've done.
Hi, Prime Minister. Crystal O, Global News. The number of cases of COVID-19 among military members helping in Ontario and Quebec long-term care homes has doubled in the past week. Why is the military not yet receiving hazard pay when they are clearly at an increased risk?
These are discussions that are ongoing within the military. We need to thank the women and men of the armed forces for stepping up yet again whenever they are called on to go into difficult or risky situations to do the work of protecting Canadians. This is what they're doing. We thank them and we salute them.
And you've had several calls this week to advance Canada's candidacy for the UN Security Council seat. As any diplomat who's tracked these votes knows, there's a heavy amount of horse trading for support. So what is Canada offering? Financial aid, votes for other candidates? What will you offer Arab countries this afternoon for their support? And what did you offer other countries and leaders earlier this week in exchange for their support?
From the beginning, Canada has framed our engagement for the UN Security Council as a means to an end. And what we are doing is demonstrating how we see the importance of multilateralism around the world, how we see a need to work together across borders to improve the situation both during this COVID crisis and contribute to a better world moving forward. Canada's voice is one that brings people together on the world stage, and we will continue to play a significant role. We are big enough to make a difference on the Council, but small enough to know that we can't do it alone. Our capacity to pull people together, to represent and reflect the diversity of the planet within our own population and make that diversity and difference a source of strength, not just within Canada, but in our multilateral organizations, is why we know that Canada has an important role to play, and Canadians have an important voice that needs to be heard on the UN Security Council going forward.
The UN Security Council and a seat there is not a goal in itself. It's an opportunity for Canadians to continue to have a positive impact on the world. We deeply believe in multiculturalism, and during this crisis, we need to work together. And we want to think about the world we're going to create coming out of this crisis. We want countries that use proper values and principles, and we want proper diversity around the planet as well, so that we can work together on climate change or on economic investments in developing countries or on technology and science. We have a role to play, and Canadians on the Security Council will have a positive impact on the world as a whole. And that's what I tell people when I speak to other world leaders, as we also talk about challenges associated with climate change and COVID-19 that are also on the agenda during these conversations. Thank you all very much.
That is the Prime Minister of Canada on this Friday.